to do so. Hence, this evening, we have amidst us a team headed by Father Viju from Christ University, Ghaziabad, to equip us with necessary skills. I have a great privilege to introduce to you Father Viju Painadath, the Director and Dean of Christ University, Ghaziabad, Delhi. A dedicated and a well-balanced person, his composed nature, keen eyes that look out for the needy, his experience as a director of counselors at Bangalore campus, the quality of his mind and heart, his missionary zeal, and many more accolades added to his personality makes him a strong pillar of Christ University. I'm extremely happy to welcome you, dear Father, on behalf of all of us who are and who will be joining this session. I would also like to welcome the dedicated staff of the same university, Dr. Sureka, who heads the Department of Humanities and Social Science, along with Ms. Tanuja Bharadwaj, a PhD scholar, teamed with Father Viju as resource persons to this session. On behalf of Sister Noreen, the principal of Pew College, I accord a warm welcome to all of you. A word of welcome to Mr. Ashok too, the IT personnel of the university, for his assistance today. We have amidst us this evening the staff of St. Agnes institutions. I welcome Sister Griselda, the principal, CBSE school and her staff, Sister Sudeepa, the headmistress of St. Agnes High School along with her staff, and Sister Josna, the headmistress of primary school and her teachers as well. I wish all of us an enriching evening. Over to you, Father.
Thank you, Sister Sannidhi. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting us to interact with you this evening. I would like to acknowledge the presence of the principals, the staff from St. Agnes institutions, and then my own, colleagues, two of them, Sureka, Tanuja, obviously she is a research scholar, and my own scholar here, and then obviously my IT people, they are with me today this evening. Thank you very much for inviting us to interact with you. I hope the next an hour and a half will be really fruitful and meaningful for us. And we have designed this session in a workshop model. So it invites a lot of your involvement and active interaction. Well, there are a few activities that you would also be doing so that, it doesn't get monotonous. Moreover, doing these activities will make us reflective. And I do not believe that there are any things that we are going to tell which you do not know, which we have not heard of. Maybe a few new terms, new understandings. But then, when we reflect together, we do well in any workshop or this sort of sessions. So once again, I thank Sister Sannidhi for taking this leadership in arranging this session. And I'm grateful to all of you present on the platform and who will be also joining shortly for your list. So we have titled our presentation, Nurturing Growth and Well-Being Among Youth, Counseling Paradigms and Skills. I do understand most of you are teaching at +2 level, and some of you may be senior high school level as well. So this will help us good. As the Sister Sannidhi in her introduction told us, well, we are supposed to educate heart. So in educating heart, well, sometimes we lag behind. So these type of sessions will surely help us. So let's get started. So we start with a short activity to just make ourselves familiarize with these terms and to also know what level of reflection already we have in this area. So I would welcome Sureka to just start with the activity. Over to Sureka.
Thank you, Father. Thank you so much for inviting us to do this presentation. So as I said, we'll first, start with a small interactive activity. I request all of you to use your either mobile phones or laptops, and then go to the site www.menti.com, MENTI.com. So once you go there, you will see a question. you need to give in the code. I will just tell you the code for going to entering your responses. It will be 475167 and 2. So I'll just type it in the chat as well. 475167 and 2. So you will have to respond to the question which says, what are the most commonly prevalent concerns or challenges of youth today? So we want you to give one or two concerns which you think, which based on your experience and expertise, what do you think are the two most common prevalent concerns with youth are facing today? So I hope you're all able to go to menti.com, www.menti.com. You can refer to the chat section in case if you're not clear. Both the site, website, as well as the code are there. You just have to give your responses and then type in your answers. Yes, I think I'm starting to get the response. We'll just have this for about a minute, so as quickly as all of you can, so that we have time for discussion on this. I have about 6 responses. We are about 39 of us here. Yeah. Can I request every one of you to try and give your responses? So what are the most commonly prevalent concerns or challenges which youth today are facing? Okay, can we make it a bit, because we have 1 or 2 more questions, so I have around 12 responses. Interesting responses. I'll just wait for about 30 seconds more and then move on to the next question which we have for us to get responses to. Right now we are responding to what are the most commonly prevalent concerns or challenges of youth today. I think I have about 17 responses. Okay, so if you go again back to the same menti.com, now the question would have changed. Please go back to menti.com, use the code 475167 and 2. And the question would be, how are these concerns expressed in their day-to-day life? So based on the challenges which you have expressed in your previous question, Menti word cloud. So what do you think are the concerns which are expressed? How is it getting translated in their day-to-day life? Some of you said, to give an example, you said social media usage. So how does it get translated into their day-to-day life? What are the things which might be influenced or affected by it? Or similarly, anything else based on your previous response? Okay, just have about 2 to 3 responses. Can we have responses for Okay. Okay, I have about 6 to 7 responses. Few more, please. Okay, about 30 more seconds, and then I move on to the third question we have for you. Okay, so now we have the third question, which says, how can you help your students in managing these challenges? So, how can you, as teachers, help students in managing these challenges? So, again, the code would be the same. You will have to go back to menti.com and respond to the last question we have for right now, which is, how can you help your students in managing these challenges? The code would again be 475167 and 2. So as teachers, what can be done to help your students in managing the challenges which we have mentioned in the previous slides? Okay. We have about 4 responses. What I'm going to do is I'll just stop sharing and I'll present to you your responses so that you have an idea about what kind of responses are coming in. I will present the screen which I'm presently seeing. Okay, I hope my screen is visible. The word cloud is visible now.
Yes, go ahead. It's
Yes,
present.
yes, Father. Thank you. Yeah. We'll wait for about 30 more seconds before we just look into your responses. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for your responses. So let me go back to the first one. So if you look at the kind of responses we got from all of you. If you're saying, what are the most commonly prevalent concerns or challenges of youth today? So we can see that I think peer pressure seems to be a bigger issue, which we all agree upon. There's depression, there's influence of social media, lack of love from parents, stress which they experience, not able to control the stress levels which they are experiencing. I think lack of life skills, as some of you said, decision making challenges, exploitation, probably they're being vulnerable, exploitation, unemployment, okay, impulsivity. So, yeah, so these are the responses which you very rightly said that are some of the most commonly prevalent concerns and challenges. And we will definitely look into these a bit more as we progress in our workshop. And the second one, when we looked at, was how are these concerns, expressed in our day-to-day life today? So how do these kids demonstrate in their everyday activities. So I think very pertinently we can see that, not able to being able to complete their work on time, easily getting irritated, staying very confused, sometimes not being true to themselves, suicidal thoughts, less concentration, shouting, postponing or procrastination, addictions, lifestyle, becoming very bold, yes, dependent on social media. So yes, so most of the previous challenges which we have seen definitely get translated into small little, activities which we do in our day-to-day life, and in various ways, those challenges are definitely kind of influencing youth today. And the last question before we move on with the actual session is about how I'm only going to look at what are your response. We'll discuss about, all three of us will discuss about your responses in the workshop as we progress. So how can you help your students? So many of you are saying by counseling, by listening to them, by being supportive to them, speaking to them as friends, motivating them, indulge them in activities, interact, share their feelings, listen to their problems, guidance, communication, yeah, talking to them. So more or less, yes, we do have most of the skills related to counseling which are there in this slide as well. So thank you so much for your response, and then over to you, Father.
Yeah.
Take forward the session. I'm going to present the PPT just in a second. But yeah.
Okay, thank you, Surekha, for this small activity. As I said, this is in a workshop model. So the more involvement, active involvement that you have, I believe you will benefit out of these sessions, because this is going to be more a reflective session. So as you rightly answered 3 questions, this is what we are going to do. Can we move to the slide before? Second slide, Surekha. Yeah, so this will be the plan of our action. So we did our first activity. I'll be introducing a bit on, some of the attributes of the youth. Some of them you have already identified by the first question. The second activity, again, we will get into, and then we will move on to, see the expected outcome of integrating. Some of you very clearly said we need to integrate counseling into the teaching as well. So we will see what are some of the expected outcomes. Then we'll also look at what are some of the paradigms, what are some of the styles of intervention that we can do in the classrooms as well. And then some of the skills, especially the skill of attending, listening, demonstrating empathy, then later rapport building, reflection, immediacy. And again, we will also see what are some of the some of the factors that you can identify, the red flags. So this will be our mode of the intervention interaction during the next an hour or so. Next slide, please, Rekha. So you answered this question, all 3 questions. Move on. Yeah. So we will be trying to the next an hour. We will be trying to answer these questions. So these are 3 questions that we will be trying to together answer. It does not mean that we are be able to answer all these questions, but at least we'll try to reflect and then try to understand these questions. Let's move on to the next slide. Well, the outcome after having attended this 1 hour, maybe 30 minutes workshop, well, this is what we are trying to achieve. We will be able to enlighten the young minds, especially those whom we interact with in our classes. And then we also try to form and transform their behavior through some of the skills that we will be learning. And we will also try to be inspirational models. Today, youth, later we'll come to this point, they may not just believe what we say, they may not take what we say, but then they are likely to follow the models that we present to them. So to be inspirational models for them. Basically, again, end of the day, we are trying to understand our own roles. Well, we are not just here to teach mathematics, physics, chemistry, or subjects in humanities and social sciences. We are moving beyond, as Sister Sanidhi said. We also learn to educate the heart, not only the head and hand. And so we try to understand the basic philosophy of our calling, our vocation to accompaniment. Basically, it's accompaniment. It's not just teaching the students in the class for 45 minutes or 1 hour and we leave them, but we accompany them emotionally, socially, interpersonally, academically. We try to accompany them. That's what we try to do. So this session, I believe, will help us to achieve these outcomes, or at least to bit on reflecting on these outcomes. Yeah. Next slide. So from your responses, we identified these are some of the areas that the challenges. First part of our presentation will be what are some of the challenges that they face. What are some of the attributes of the youth? So you said some of them are anxious, worried, bullied in the school, thinking about hurting themselves, suicidal ideations. Sometimes they feel low. Some of you said depression. There's a lot of peer pressure. Again, parental pressure and peer pressure. Where to strike balance? Whether I need to adhere to the parental pressure or peer pressure. And then a possibility is low self-confidence. Next slide. Well, again, continuing with some of the problems that they face and what you identified: bullying, health problems. I'll show you data, what percentage of our youth, youth, when I say the age group from maybe 15 to 20, what percentage of them have health problems, we'll see in the next slide. Social media issues, they said, many of them, we may not know, many of them have extra exam stress. There are students who go completely blank when they get a question paper. Then they are their work related or career related, further future studies related questions that they have. Then anger outbursts, we find anxiety, and apprehensions, self-harm. Some of them have OCD. OCD is obsessive compulsive disorder. Some of them have obsessive compulsive personality disorder. Then they have a lot of questions related to sexuality, their own, and as well as in the relationship obviously with the heterosexual relationship, with peers, with family members. Some of them also have spouts of panic attack, and some of them, maybe if you take Mangalore and Bangalore in Karnataka, this percentage seems to be a little higher regarding the addictions. So let's move on to the next slide. So this is I base my presentation based on one book written by a manual written by Chandrasekhar, C.R. Chandrasekhar, and published by from NIMHANS. The name of the book is Manual for College Teachers on Student Counseling. Manual for College Teachers on Student Counseling. When I was in Bangalore, I bought some copies of this book. It had exhausted. Chandrasekhar, written by Chandrasekhar. He has done an extensive study on the population, mostly in Bangalore, in Mangalore, and various other cities in Karnataka, and has come out with this statistic. So I base most of my reflections on this book, based on this book. So his study shows that almost 50% of the adolescents and late adolescents, they suffer from health problems. 15% of them suffer from mental disorders, and some of the mental disorders you also identify, like depression, anxiety, hysteric symptoms, somatic disorders, somatoform disorders, and adjustment reactions, alcohol and drug abuse, and many more have emotional problems related to their family and college life. I still remember some of my students, especially who used to come to me for counseling needs. The most significant problem that I have identified, especially at the age of 17, 18, 19, or maybe also 20, is the conflict in the family. Conflict between the parents, both the spouses, and between the parents and the children are one of the major type of problem, emotional problem that they have been facing. They find it quite difficult to accept that parents fight. Yeah. So, Sureka, next slide, please. In Bangalore, the prevalence of alcohol use varied between 23.5 for males and 5.3 for females. Another drug, heroin was about 1% for males and 0.3 for females. Cannabis, which I think should be higher than this statistics, 1.3 for males and 0.45 for female students. If you take the whole of Karnataka, the prevalence of alcohol is 11.9 among students and 7.5 in the general populations. You see, among the students or among the youth, it is higher when you look at the general population. Again, study by NIMHANS. Next slide. Well, some of the important attributes that we need to understand. So why I'm saying this in the beginning is, well, when we are able to be aware that these are the students our students go through, one of the major problem that the youth face is identity crisis. When I say identity crisis, well, we could surely understand, look at from two terms. One, they want to establish their own unique identity, their own individual identity, compared to or in relation to what others have developed. So they want to have unique and individual identity, and this means what differentiate one from others. So this is the time that they usually navigate through and understand this is my identity. And along with that, they also have very strong need for autonomy. Slowly moving from childhood to adolescence and emerging adult or late adolescence, they want to be independent. They want to be independent from their parents. They also want to be independent from from the teachers. So whatever we say, they may not accept. But as I said, whatever we model, they are likely to accept. So this is also a time of exploration related to their own sexuality, and also try to understand what it means to be the opposite gender in terms of intimacy and things like that. Then there is also very strong tendency for risk-taking behavior. This will come to again, risk-taking behavior. This is also a phase they discover their own selves, especially in terms of what they want to choose in the future, what type of occupation, what type of higher studies they need to do. So they tend to discover and themselves. And whatever we say, there's also a sort of decreased tolerance for change. And then they find it difficult to modulate their own behavior. It's not completely their problem. So sometimes we feel that they are doing by their own intention. Well, we need to understand, if you look at the physiological or brain changes at this point of time, their prefrontal cortex is still being developed. Now, so what happens is, the cognitive control is very, very less at this point of time. So they become very impulsive, and that leads to risk-taking behavior. They are not able to exercise this, cognitive control, like inhibiting some of their impulses and things like that. So it's not basically their problem that we can attribute to. It's also partly the style of their growing up. So you would find also inappropriate mood swings and angry outbursts. Students being very argumentative, students showing forth some attitude. But the way we deal with those maybe attitude or angry outbursts, it can really help them. It can change them. Next slide, please. Well, continuing with few more attributes. Well, they have, as I said, very strong feelings and emotions with intense opposite relationship. This they are not able to control so much, and they don't want you to tell them what to be done. So sort of a negativism you find. So don't tell me how long my hair can be. So I'm sure I used to confront these questions especially in the first year undergraduate studies. Well, the hairstyle, so we tend to tell them, so the way you tell them all this matters. Then don't tell me how short my skirt can be. So I'm just put two examples, sort of negativism. And they feel that they have a mind of their own, and you don't want them to tame them. And then another thing is, at home also they get into confrontation. Not only at school, they get into confrontation at home. See, parents and adolescents argue about their own choice of friends, peer groups, school plans, course of study, things like that. So this is a time of very, very strong crisis, a time of change. Change, obviously, both biological, physiological changes, and at the same time, a lot of emotional, changes or, expectations from parents, from, teachers, and, their own inability to control some of their emotional outbursts, impulsivity, and things like that. Next slide, please. Well, two major tasks. I've just mentioned to you two major tasks at this. This is also what we need to help them. One is establishing an identity, a unique individual identity. If this doesn't happen, they will have low self-esteem, which can have again negative psychosocial or other emotional, the consequences. And then moving from being independent to dependent to an independent state. Well, here also as teachers, we can help them. Now, how do we help them? One way could be, being a sort of secure attachment figures. Now, you must be remembering your own, days of, 17, 18, 19, or maybe 15, 16, 17, 18. Well, we still remember those teachers who showed us compassion, empathy, who listened to us, who understood us, isn't it? So they become a sort of secure attachment figures for us. When we are able to become that sort of a secure attachment figure, which means a sort of enduring, affectionate bond, if we can create with them, well, I'm sure we'll be able to help these two major, challenging tasks that the adolescents are, facing. One is to become independent, and second is, establishing identity. Sureka, next slide. I also told we need to understand they have very, very, very high chance of risk-taking behavior. And I said biological reason. The development of prefrontal cortex takes at least, when they are 20, maybe we can achieve some bit of it. Until then, they are very impulsive. They are likely to experiment a lot, experiment with drug, with alcohol, with so many other substances. So drug and alcohol use, tobacco use, and accident-prone behaviors. And this also make them, some way they are trying to also answer their own inadequacy or low self-esteem, or sometimes they have to affirm their own identity as male or female. That's also a reason, or peer pressure also leads them to risk-taking behavior. So this is again that we need to identify in them. So then negating, understanding, and helping them is more useful. Next slide. Now, one thing, some of you also are, I know on the platform, are parents. Now, parents are also, if you look at, when children are almost, adolescents or late adolescents, we also have challenges as parents. They are mostly in the middle age, and they themselves have to make a lot of adjustments. Adjustments in the family, in the workplace, or maybe establishing maybe a good, the home and things like that. So on the one hand, we ourselves have a lot of challenges during the middle age, and along with there are also other biological changes happening that also can lead to frustration. So we need to understand the independence, the tendency for adolescents to be independent. It's not actually, it should not be actually threatening for us. We need to understand this aspect, and obviously we have to accept there is a generation gap. So what we say, they don't understand. What they say, we do not understand. So parents need to endure the distressing loss of authority without losing responsibility. What I'm trying to say is we need to make them independent. At the same time, we also need to make them accountable. We have responsibility to develop them to be independent individuals. We do not want them to be dependent on us all throughout. So appropriate limits on behavior we need to put on while encouraging the independence. We need to help them to be independent. At the same time, accountability has to be also insisted upon in an amicable way, in a correct way. Otherwise, they may not grow, they may not be independent. Sureka. Their body, see, we know their bodies is not the only thing that grow. They also, grow as potential. Their potential to be full human being is also growing. So understanding that, we need to put enough restraints, enough control, enough accountability, but freedom, independence has to be given to. Next slide. So instead of seeing how to constrict them, well, we need to allow them to expand, and that's what they also want, and that's what we need to also try to do. Well, I think Sureka can take over now. Move on with the next part of your presentation.
Thank you, Father. Break the monotony. I will share a link again here in the Google chat. So can you please respond? I'll give you the question as well. So this is a Google Jamboard. All you need to do is click on the link and then select a post-it from there and then give your responses. I'll just tell you in a minute what the questions are. So this is the link which is there in the chat box, and your question would be, I think you can see it now on the slide. Write 5 most important skills that a teacher should possess while handling youth related to issues. So 5 most important skills which a teacher should possess. So once you click on the link, you will reach a Jamboard. I can see that many of you have already joined. You need to select the post-it from the left side. Sticky note it is called, which is the fourth option on the left side. So you can see a pen, you can see an arrow mark. Right below the arrow mark is a sticky note. Select a sticky note and then you can give your responses. I'm just doing one for demonstration, so I would say attention skills. And then just save. So I think you can see the sticky note over there. Yes, I can see that. I'm going to present my screen so that you can see what you're responding. I hope the Jamboard is visible. Father, is it visible?
Visible, it's visible.
Yeah, yeah. So we are getting few responses here when we speak about skills which we as teachers can have. I think the responses are not being judgmental. Don't trust everything that they say, but listen. Okay, having a lot of patience. They should gain your trust. They should gain your trust. You should be very supportive. Again, listening skills, open-mindedness, empathy, kindness. Okay, patience to listen, understanding. We have many of them who have written understanding is very important. Being secretive about the talk, so I'm assuming not disclosing things, so ensuring that confidentiality is maintained. Yes. Being loyalty to the profession, constant support to the students. Okay. Okay, just about 30 more seconds so that we have few more responses and then we can move on. Any other responses? Okay, so someone who's given positive strokes. Being very clear and specific in words, yes. When we communicate, it becomes very important so that the expectations are clear. Okay. So any more responses? I think you can, someone is trying to write. You can use a sticky note here if you can see my, yeah. You can use the fourth one, which is a sticky note to give your responses. Okay, fine. constant support. Fine. I think I'm going to stop presenting right now and go back to the PPT. Um, Thank you so much for your responses. I'm just opening the PPT again. Okay, I think let's get back to understanding. So far we have discussed, Father very clearly has spoken about what are the typical characteristics of youth at, when they are in that particular life stage. And then as we understood that identity and then being very prone to vulnerable to addictions, risk-taking behavior, relationships, all of that definitely becomes a main focus. So while they are in our classrooms, while they are part of the learning exercises as well, many of these various other attributes which we spoke about definitely has an influence in how they are responding to in the learning environment. How are they performing in their academic performance, as well as even in terms of their overall well-being and growth and development. So now I would move on from what Father has been saying to understand. So we looked into what are the 5 important skills, but we looked at few important skills. Many of you gave rightly that you need to be understanding, you need to be able to listen. So counseling is one very useful, technique which could be used to work with youth. And today, as part of this workshop, we will probably have a little insight into uh, how we can incorporate these into our everyday classroom environment, and then how that could be beneficial for the students. So here we are not talking about a full-fledged professional counseling relationship, but then how many of the skills which are part of counseling process could be very seamlessly used as part of a teaching learning in our universities and educational institutions. I would also like to highlight the case that why teachers, have to also, probably incorporate or, try to train themselves on some of these skills is because we know that there is a clear shortage of mental health professionals in our country. The number of counselors, trained professional counselors available is also very less. So the ratio of professionals available to the number of, as we saw in the statistics which Father has presented about how increasing issues related to various problems which youth are facing. So there is a need for more and more trained professionals. But I think one way we could work towards ensuring that a larger chunk of these kids get timely help is when teachers who are there with them for a great deal of time also are able to work with them and ensure that certain challenges which are not very critical and do not need a severe counseling or a psychiatric kind of a therapeutic session, but simpler ones related to stress, anxiety, and all could be dealt with very effectively in the educational institution system as well. So few benefits of counseling which we need to understand, how does it help all the adolescents is that first of all, I think when we talk about PU and especially 10th, I think it's very stressful for them. They are at that particular point of their life where they are deciding which stream to go on and then what would be the future career which they want to take up. So a lot of youngsters nowadays are very confused about their academic and career goals. Though most of them are open to experiment and try out, but lack of information and lack of sufficient guidance at that particular crucial juncture is leading to more and more students taking wrong decisions related to career. And then 4 years or 5 years, once they spend time, say many of them go for engineering and then finish engineering or maybe take up any other professional course, and then they realize this is not what they want to do. And then they are re-looking at changing the streams and changing the field. So that is not wrong, but I think what is more important here is that if they get timely inputs and information about how they could take their decisions and what should be their style of thinking when it comes to career, then it would definitely benefit them at the right time. And we also spoke about how better relationships are important at this particular life cycle stage. So I think counseling definitely also helps them understand, gain more insight. So the skills which we use in the classrooms as teachers sometimes can help them understand how they're responding to various situations and different people. It could be with family, it could be with teachers, it could be with friends. So what is going wrong in their interactions with others? So to be able to give them that insight and to be able to work with them so that they understand what exactly is could be done so that they could work on better relationships. So we know a lot of peer pressure is there, and then kids start doing things, and they are probably doing many things which they otherwise do not want to, because simply because of peer pressure. So to help them get an insight into what is it that they really want and how they can work on their own identity and confidence beyond just depending on what the other friends or classmates have to say. This is the time, I think, counseling skills, when we practice, also helps them deal with their own emotions better. So when we talk about emotions, first they need to identify what are they feeling, because we said there are a lot of mood swings, there's irritability, they are confused. So many of the adolescents, many of the youth nowadays are not clear about what exactly are they feeling. So are they frustrated about something? Are they fearful of something? So I think kind of helping them through identifying what emotions are they going through, and also help them understand when they are in a group situation, when they are working with other teachers, when they are in the family context, or when they are working with their other children, they should be able to respond to and understand how others are feeling as well. So we live in a social society, and then when youth have to work together and grow together as fellow individuals, so they have to work with others as well. So to be able to rightly understand others emotions and to be able to respond appropriately, all of this is emotional intelligence. So counseling skills, using counseling skills in the classroom definitely helps them to have greater self-confidence, help them have good emotional intelligence. We can help them nurture assertiveness. We can ensure that we work using these skills to help them reduce their stress levels and their anxiety which they feel. It could be when exam stress, or it could be relationship stress, it could be stress related to day-to-day activities as well. But yes, once we can help them with counseling, they can work through these challenges as well. And establishing boundaries, very importantly, because it's very easy for them to we also see that many of them right now, the language they use, so whatever they use in their social media, the same thing they try to write in the answer scripts as well, and that same language is used for writing their responses. So they are not aware. It is not that they deliberately do it, but the boundaries about what is a professional system, what is a personal kind of a system, and then how each one of us should interact and behave in each of those systems is different. So am I audible?
Yes, Surega, go ahead, go ahead.
Oh, pardon, no, because I was just getting a call, I got confused. Yeah, sorry. Okay, so we are trying to work through all of these areas. So these are bigger problems, definitely need more serious professional help. But at a smaller level, when they are at the beginning stage, we as teachers in the classrooms can help them deal with many of these problems. So that's the case for us to have certain skills which will help us help the students in working through these issues. So teachers, as a counselor, we are not talking about them being full-fledged professionals, but as teachers, we can help them adjust to their surroundings, both their academic and personal environments, helping them with their studies, helping them with understanding at that particular crucial juncture how important it is for them to do certain academic tasks, to help them take logical, rational decisions rather than going more by emotional decisions, because many of them later on, kind of, we are not deciding for them, but we can help them take the right kind of decision. and help them with their learning problems as well. We know that many of them have different kinds of challenges related to their learning. So help them with that, help them establish a routine. And then if there are more, as I was talking about time and again, if the need is more severe that we as teachers cannot handle it, then to guide them, to refer them to a right counselor so that professional help is at hand for them. And then teachers should work in collaboration with the counselors in the schools, colleges, universities, or even have a database of professionals in the community so that we could do the referral at the right point of time. We could also help work with the students to ensure that they work on collaboratively with their parents, because we have seen this is a phase of conflict. So we would definitely want them to ensure that the family issues are not getting spilled over and they're also able to deal with them effectively. A very brief overview. We cannot take all of this at this point of time because each one of the skill needs a lot of practice and a lot of training. But to give you an overview about what could be the basic skills which could be useful for us in the classrooms. So attending skills, which I'll be talking about a little more in detail sometime from now. Attending skills are about how, when what is your body posture, and how are you responding to the person, how well are you attending to the person. And reflecting and paraphrasing is a technique again which is used when you are kind of ensuring that whatever you're understanding from what the student is saying is correct, and then you rechange the meaning and you rechange it, put it in different words and check with them if this is what they mean by what they are saying. So understanding that sometimes it helps when we are listening to them, they are speaking a lot of things, and then quickly summarize and represent. So one is, it not just helps us understand their point of view correctly, but it also, when another person is summarizing and putting it back to them, so they have new insights about their behavior, and they probably are looking at the problem or at the challenge from a newer perspective. So when they are pouring out their stories, and we as teachers listen to them and then just briefly, crisply summarize and then put it back, so they get to see a different perspective of it when they are hearing it from someone else. And that itself sometimes can help them in understanding which direction they have to take in order to work forward in their problems. Using right kind of questions, and the way we ask questions is also very important. More open-ended questions if we want to know, work with them and help them, rather than simply asking factual questions are also important, but to a great extent, yes, no questions will not help. So if you want them to talk to us in detail, if you want them to ask us, so how have you been feeling lately, rather than are you angry right now, because that just limits them saying okay, yes or a no. But how have you been feeling of late talks about, it gives them an opportunity to reflect and think about what they have been feeling, and also help focus on certain aspects, because a lot comes out with our interactions, but then in terms of what exactly are those major kind of issues which are important, and then what could be the areas which we can identify that could be important to work as we progress forward. And there are certain times immediacy, responding to situations are more important then and there at that particular point of time, rather than for waiting for some other situation in some other context. So we need to identify those situations. For example, if someone has had, say a loss in a family, and then instead of waiting for more days, but to respond immediately and showing our concern at that particular point of time is more better, rather than thinking about, keeping it that, okay, at a later point of time, I will address it. Rapport building is very important if we want them to, open up with us, if we want them to, if we have to help them and if they have to share and experience, it's very important that we share a relationship wherein students feel comfortable, youth feel comfortable to talk to us about their issues, and they believe that we can support them. So we will talk a little more about rapport building as well. Ms. Tanuja will talk about it. And in certain situations, I think silence as a technique is also very important. So when I say silence, sometimes, just being silent when they are saying too much or they're crying, things like that is also important, rather than trying to respond all the time to whatever they are saying. So Silence also can be effectively used as a technique to ensure that they get insights and work through their challenges. So I will talk briefly about, there are many approaches to counseling work. There are many paradigms, but I think it doesn't, really make sense for us to right now discuss all of those paradigms and approaches or theories. But I want to highlight two major frameworks which could be relevant for us as teachers when we work, because we already are doing, using that approach when we work with them. So before I move on, I think all of you can see this image in the chat message. If you could, if you're in the chat section, if you could just let me know what can you infer from this picture. What can we infer from this picture? Can I have few responses in the chat, please? Is the picture visible? Can I have some responses, please?
Yeah, ma'am, it's visible.
Okay. Okay, I can see that. Okay, there are a lot of responses. We can see that some of you are saying someone stressed, burdensome. Okay, not able to remember what she has studied. Okay, stress, confused, frustration, worried. Okay, feels forced, frustrated, panic, mind blanks out, might have forgotten the answers. Okay, very good. So I have a lot of responses here. Thank you so much for those responses. Now, what I wanted to highlight is we may be right, we may be wrong, but when we talk about, the first possible approach, which is person-centered approach, many of us, if you see, have this, we tend to be judgmental. We tend to kind of, immediately have some assumptions related to what is going on, and that kind of interferes with, what kind of statements we say to the person, and then how are we responding to them. So to a greater extent we probably are judgmental and we have a preconceived notions, and that interfere with how we are responding. So the person might just, for 1 second might be just, putting the head down, and that is the point of time when the picture was taken. Though, or it could also be possible, as some of you said, that the person could not remember anything or feels very frustrated of not knowing the answers, whatever it is. But one of the important things, framework of person-centered approach, is that, individuals are, the value for human beings, as compared to other therapeutic counseling approaches, wherein the counselor, takes a lot of plays a lot of role in interpretation of what exactly is happening. But here we believe in the person and their ability to develop themselves. So full, confidence in the person. When we take a person-centered approach, the first thing we need to do is to be able to believe that they are capable of, working on themselves. They're capable of changing themselves, and we are mere facilitators. So three core, principles, concepts when we have to use a person-centered approach while we work with youth is that, we should have unconditional positive regard, being empathetic towards them, and being genuine, congruence where you are genuine. So as far as possible, we need not get into interpretations, but we help facilitate them see what exactly is, the concern. So to be able to be empathetic, so not just being sympathetic about what went wrong, but about trying to understand from empathy. I'm sure many of you know that, empathy is about trying to understand a perspective, trying to understand a situation from the person's perspective, or not from our own perspective. So many of them face different kinds of challenges nowadays. So rather than thinking that maybe the person is, frustrated, maybe the person is, so we can avoid those kind of conclusions, but we could rather let the person explore what is happening, what went wrong. It might be true, what we are assuming might be true, but there is that need for judgment may not be there at that particular point of time. So let them explore, let them think, and let them see what went wrong, and what is the context of that, and if they have to work to help facilitate those positive skills in them, so that they're able to take better decisions, they're able to work in a positive direction, and also help them build, or those skills, competencies which are required for them, like be it decision making, or be it conflict resolution, anger management. The basic belief is that the person can work on themselves, and they will be able to. We are facilitators, and we have to be genuine in our intention. So many a times, I think this, I'm sure, we all tend to be very busy, and we probably sometimes when we respond without knowingly or unknowingly, intentionally or unintentionally, we tend to be very limited in our response to them. So we do not intend anything negative, but a simple yes, no, or not a sufficient response to a situation which they are asking you for or us for. And then sometimes we are doing it as a formality. So nowadays kids can see through that. They can see that this is just being a formality, and this is not very intentional. So one of the core ideas of person-centered approach is, when we want to support them, when we want to help using counseling skills, or when we are in the classrooms as teachers, it's very important that they kind of develop, we demonstrate genuineness in our intention to help them by using the right kind of phrases, interest, and also unconditional positive regard is to to be non-judgmental, and at the same time ensure that we are trying to help without any conditions. So okay, you stop, you study, you score so much in exams, then we will see how we can work on this. No, I mean, no conditions at all, or only if you do this, then we can probably work on this. No. So those kind of limit settings or conditions is not part of unconditional positive regard and empathy. So when we use a person-centered approach even in our everyday interactions, I think to demonstrate some empathy by trying to show them that yes, we are trying to understand how they are feeling or what they are thinking, or what they want to do, and by demonstrating that with a lot of genuineness, showing that yes, we are concerned, and then also demonstrating positive regard for the person, helps them build confidence and work with them. So we are facilitators, as I said. The other approach which we also, I think, use very commonly, many of you must be doing this, is a behavioral approach. So when we work with them, we either say, okay, you do this, and then then as a result you will get something. That's a positive reinforcement. So if we are telling to the students that you probably complete this much today, then tomorrow you might not have to, you need not do something, or then that increases, or you will get a star, or maybe for kids at that age, grade, some certificate or something. So you do this and you will get a certificate as a positive reinforcement. And sometimes you do that so that you do not have to do a repeat assignment. So that tends to increase their desirable behavior. So taking away something increases desirable behavior is a negative reinforcement, but giving something which increases a desirable behavior is a positive reinforcement. So as I was saying, if I want a student to work harder for the examination, then I would say that if you are able to work, anything could be a reinforcer that you get. You spend so many hours studying each day, then you will probably be given say an extra 1 mark in the assignment or something of that sort. So there are different ways which we can work, adding something, giving something. There are different kinds of reinforcers, material reinforcers, social reinforcers. Sometimes appreciation works. Giving something increases behavior. Sometimes if they are not wanting something and something undesirable they want to avoid, so taking that away also helps them working on increasing desirable behavior. So if they do not want to attend a particular session, and then if you say that okay, if you spend more time on this, then we ensure that you will not do what you do not want to, then the desirable behavior increases. That is your negative reinforcement. So in our classrooms, a lot of this is used right from school till, even in colleges and universities. To this is conditioning basically, and then we are working through their behaviors. So I will very quickly run through two of the attention skills and then hand it over to Tanuja. The first one is attending behavior. Now, though these are typical attending behavior, which is required by a counselor who's sitting in a session and then, facing the client. But I think here the context would be that, whenever we are talking to a person, to be able to, face them, directly, squarely, rather than, in any other direction. So to be able to give eye contact, not rather looking here and there and then responding to the person. Nowadays, I think most of the time, kids or even most of us also are using mobile phones, and when we are responding, we probably do not give the necessary eye contact. So giving an eye contact, facing them, having an open posture when we are either in a sitting or standing, which is non-threatening to the person. And then showing our interest. Leaning forward, L does not mean that we are literally leaning. What it means is that showing through our body, that yes, we are definitely interested in what they are saying, and ensure that uh, clients feel comfortable, the kids feel comfortable when they see you, so that they do not feel anxious. So attending behavior is all about how we demonstrate through our body language, how we can make them be more motivated to speak to us, and then ensure that they understand that we are attending to what they are trying to say. On the same lines, we have something called as active listening. So listening, if we have to give an example, many a times, we know hearing is different from listening. So we hear a lot of things, but we are actually not paying attention. So listening is when we are trying to pay attention and understand the meaning of what is being heard. So that is the difference. Now, what is the difference between listening and active listening is most of the times, even in listening, we tend to, get a little of the context and not the entire thing. So active listening would mean where, you are consciously trying to listen, give attention, and then understand what the person is trying to say by appropriately and adequately responding to the person when the interaction is happening. So a few basic things which we need to keep in mind when active listening has to be demonstrated is to be able to ensure, like body language, as I spoke previously, that eye contact, and then like it's not like we are seeing somewhere, sitting looking at some other direction and then trying to answer the person when they are talking about some serious concern of theirs. Then they not try to look detached during your interaction. Then don't always be in a hurry if you do not have time and space at that particular point of time. So you can always give a later time for you to work with them. And sometimes sometimes it's okay to allow some silence in your interaction. As I said, silence is also a very important technique which could be used, because a lot of the time they just want to vent out. So trying to, after every sentence or two, trying to say something, suggest something may not be an appropriate response. So if what you see is what is happening is venting out of pent up emotions, I think to just be silent and to be listen and to give them that space, even when they are silent and you are silent, to give that gap sometimes also helps them reflect and then move on in a most positive direction. And also always encourage clarification. Ask them to, so that we understand it more better, and during the process of them clarifying, they also be more clearer about what are the challenges or issues they are having. Adequately summarize and paraphrase and reflect when we are interacting with them, so that we know that whatever we are understanding about what the person is saying is correct. And at the same time, they also get to listen from the other person and look at it from a different perspective, and gain new insights about their own challenges. And understanding is not just about verbally saying things, but also through body language, gestures, as simple as saying aha, okay, fine. All of this is also part of active listening. And let's acknowledge the emotions of students. So if they are crying, I mean, there's no need to stop. We can allow them to, there's don't cry, it's not good thing. Also, we see that okay, we also have things like boys don't cry. All of that will not help. So it's okay. I mean, if someone is going through the experience and emotion, we can definitely try and let allow them to uh, go on. So meanwhile, I have this small situation here. So you can probably just look at your responses. Think about how would you do, what would you say. Maybe the responses could be in the chat section. Here, there is a person who wears these shoes. It's a 17-year-old person, and the person is very worried about how he looks, and he's not being accepted as part of any group. So he's worried about his looks and that he might not be accepted. And to top it, his parents have a lot of expectations from him, both for his academic performance as well as general. So if you are trying to, put yourselves in his shoes, how do you think, he might be feeling, and what do you think would you do or say which will make him feel better? So this is a very hands-on context for you. So we want you to, just imagine being in the shoes of the other person. This is empathizing basically. And then what do you think he might be feeling being in that situation, in this context, and what would you do or say to make him feel better? Okay, we can see some messages in the chat. Meanwhile, Tanuja, if you can get ready. Okay, so not able to recollect answers. So that's a different question. So is the context clear? So you can just try imagine being in the boy's shoes. I think you can see it. And then what if you are assuming you are in the boy's position, what do you think will be the various thoughts which will be going on in your mind? Or what would you be feeling? Can I have few responses? Okay, you are feeling lonely. We tend to feel frustrated. Okay, angry. Yes. A lot of time it's easy to just respond to the person saying, no, it's okay, everything will be fine. But when we try and imagine ourselves being in that position, that's when, we get to, understand, we get to see that, yeah. And what would you say is to have a positive attitude? Okay. Okay. Fear of rejection. Yes. Okay, so we are just going back to over to you, Tanuja. Thank you so much for your responses, and then we'll just this is a brief time for us to do all the skills too much in detail, but we just gave you an overview of the skills, and then Tanuja will talk about more important skills. So Tanuja, I'm ensuring that the mentee is live now. The question will be visible in the slide, so we will move on to the next one.
All right, ma'am. Good evening, everyone. I hope I'm audible. I'm extremely sorry for my bad throat, but I would like to be as comprehensible as I can throughout this interaction. So, first of all, I must appreciate all of you for being teachers. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is because Christ has given me this opportunity to take classes for UG and PG students. And trust me, it's not easy at all to take a teacher role. I seriously like my student role. I'm Father Viju's scholar, and I seriously appreciate that role. But when it comes to being a teacher, I swear it's such a difficult task to achieve, and it's so difficult to relate, to the teenagers and the adolescents that you are interacting with on everyday basis. So I must congratulate all of you in the very first place. So with this, I would like to begin the discussion on the other skills that are very important for us uh, as being teachers, and especially when we are interacting with the teenagers, right? So we will start with this brief activity. I would require quick responses on how would you define rapport in one word. So if you have to define this term rapport, how would you go about defining it in just one term? So can you just like quickly provide us with the responses? Surekha ma'am, I would require your help to
Yes, the meeting is already on, and then the code is 4751672. It's the same code, 4751672. You have to
so
go
I
to.
have put the code again in the chat box. You all can go through the code and please type it in to answer this question.
Yes, that's the code.
I can see a few responses here with some words written as friendly, understanding, perfect understanding, agreement, approach, empathy, going along, friendly, togetherness, dealing. Togetherness, excellent. Any more quick responses? I can see 12 responses as of now. All right, so all of you are quite right in defining this term. When we talk about rapport, it is basically a harmonious relationship between you and your students. Now, this relationship is not just a relationship of being together, especially when you're interacting in the classrooms, but also to generate a sense of trust in your students. So I'll quickly share one example which I personally experienced. So when I was undergoing my MPhil training, at that time I came across an adolescent case, and this was a case of bullying. Now this teenager was sitting right in front of me and said that, you know, I had been bullied a lot of times, and still there are times when I get bullied in my class. Trust me, I was being empathetic towards this teenager, and I said, oh, that was difficult. Then he said, I really felt bad, and I really feel bad when I go through such experiences. And I said, I can understand. Now this person asked me a question and said, have you ever been bullied in your school? And I said, no. Then this person replied by saying, then you do not understand. Now, trust me, that moment was so embarrassing for me. I went to my supervisor and said, ma'am, this was the kind of experience that I had with my first adolescent case of bullying. And then she said, that's all right. You are going to have many more such experiences, but that's okay. That's how you learn. That was during my MPhil training. It was actually very embarrassing. So when I say that we have to develop that rapport, it is not an easy task. And Surekha ma'am has already talked about empathy. We say that it's easy for us to understand. By saying that I can understand, it's easy for us to use that word sitting on the other end of the table. But do we actually understand? The way we are choosing our words while interacting, with these teenagers or adolescents is something that has to be done so wisely that it does not fire back onto us. With this, I would like to start the concept of rapport formation, how it matters and why it matters, right? Building rapport has various components. For instance, we talk about commonality. At times it happens that when we are interacting with these students in the class, we talk about shared interests, that okay, I also like this sport that you people like. Oh, okay, so when I was in college, I also used to enjoy the things that you're enjoying right now. So we are actually trying to find out a common page on which we all can relate with each other. So we need to find out those shared interests with our students so that they also have that sense of trust into us, right? The second thing is having a non-judgmental attitude. Now, it sounds easy, and when we read it, that time also it appeared very easy. But when it comes to practice, it becomes difficult because at times we are also human beings, and it's not easy to get over those judgments. It takes time for us to develop that sort of a non-judgmental attitude. So I'll quickly share one example with you. There was this case which was referred of an adolescent, and he was brought along with the mother, and the mother was so anxious and worried about this child. You know, the kind of complaint that she presented with was this teenager was in 11th standard, and she said that, ma'am, my child has a serious problem. Then I probed further into it, asking, okay, what is the problem that your child is facing? Then she said that he is in 11th standard and he still watches cartoons. Now, do you see a problem here? Like, how many of you actually see a problem in this? That an 11th standard, teenager is actually watching cartoons. Then I was like, okay, this is something that at times we also do. Like, what is being so judgmental about it? So this is just a small example as to how we try to, compare normal and abnormal according to, certain parameters. So it can happen in your classrooms as well, that some kids may not act in a very normal fashion. Now, it doesn't mean that it is necessarily abnormal. So we need to see whether we are being too judgmental about those concerns, or is it something that actually requires our attention. So being non-judgmental is again a very good characteristic that we possess as a teacher in order to form a good rapport with the students with whom we interact on everyday basis. Now, inviting behavior, again, this is an important skill. When we talk about inviting behavior, we need to give them that space. At times, you may be facing certain challenges wherein the students actually do not have certain concepts of boundaries. In that, we have to choose our inviting behavior very wisely. For instance, we can ask the student, I think you can take a seat. That way, it would be more comfortable for us to interact, isn't it? So we, in a very subtle form, we try to introduce that boundary, which is again a healthy boundary between us and the student, right? So here we are actually engaging in an inviting behavior, but at the same time, respecting those boundaries which are necessary for that interaction. On contrary, you may experience certain students who may be very anxious and then they may not open up very easily. In those cases, we have to be more positive in our approach and we can have more inviting behavior. For example, we can lean forward a bit and then try to interact with the child in order to make him or her more comfortable. Another important characteristic of rapport building is emotional mirroring. Now, when I say emotional mirroring, what am I trying to, communicate here is when a student comes to you and says that, I have been feeling very frustrated of lately. Now, when we engage in emotional mirroring, first of all, we are being non-judgmental about that concern of the student that he or she presents with. At the same time, we are trying to paraphrase or reflect on the emotions of this person by saying, it must be difficult for you. There must be so many things going on in your mind right now, which may be making you feel frustrated at this moment. So what are we trying to do? We are taking from the key terms of our students and trying to reflect back on their feelings. And that is a part of emotional mirroring. So we have to somehow understand their own terminologies and take from their terms, from their key terms, in order to reflect back on their feelings. Now, this sort of an exercise actually helps them in order to being heard. Like they understand that we are being heard by our teacher and she's actually trying to understand what I'm saying. right? So another skill is choice of questions. So when I say choice of questions, we have to choose our questions very wisely. For instance, these are some of the statements that all of us are, vulnerable to make. For instance, I think you are feeling very angry at me and the boredom is a cover. This is a very blunt statement that, we may possibly engage in. Or, behind your silence is a great deal of anger. And I think you're really very angry right now. And you're denying how angry you are. Now, these are very judgmental statements that we are engaging in. Instead, we can use these statements on the right. I have the sense that you are angry, but feel you're not supposed to be. I wonder if you're staying silent because you feel you had better not to say anything if what you're feeling is anger. Now, what is the difference that we see here in these statements? In the second statements, we are trying to imply the idea that it's okay to get angry, right? We are being non-judgmental about it. At the same time, we are bringing it to the notice of the student that the emotion that you are experiencing right now is anger, and we need to deal with it, isn't it? So the second sort of statements are always better to engage in, wherein we are being non-judgmental about it, and we are not like very blunt in our statements while we are interacting with our students. Now, another form of questions is, why didn't you complete your work? Like, we have this tendency to say, no, like, you should have submitted it on time. Why didn't you submit it on time? It again sounds very judgmental and inquisitive. At the same time, we can ask another question on contrary to it. You must have had some good reason for not completing your work. Now, what is it actually implying here? It is giving the opportunity to the student to actually talk about the reasons, which may also be genuine in nature, to talk about those reasons and feel being understood by you as a teacher. So it's very important for us to engage in questions which are non-judgmental and non-inquisitive, giving space to the teenagers or the adolescents to explain and clarify their points and to reason with us in a healthy manner. Now, another technique is rhetorical question. Now, when do we use it? For example, if a teenager or an adolescent has engaged in something which is not acceptable, now rather than saying that you're such a dumb person, or why the hell are you engaging in such sort of a behavior, we can ask a rhetorical question. Now, a rhetorical question does not necessarily have an answer. It talks about the effect. For example, is it just you who shouldn't do this, or would it be a terrible thing if anyone did it? Now, if you ask this question to your student definitely does not have any answer to this, right? But understands the idea that he or she actually did something wrong, right? So, in those scenarios, rhetorical questions actually play a very important role. So, the way we are framing our statements in the form of a rhetorical question is actually making a difference in the way we are making the student perceive the situation, which may not necessarily be right or is somehow wrong, so that they can take the ownership of that situation, isn't it? So there are certain obstacles that can emerge in the process of rapport formation. The first and foremost is asking personal questions. Okay, why didn't you do your work just because you had gone out with your boyfriend? This is something which is very personal and very intimidating, that something that can actually hurt the sentiments of the student, isn't it? So we cannot engage in such personal questions and give personal remarks on the students. For example, I have seen your performance in the past and you have been such a dumb student, or your performance in the past has been so I seriously don't expect anything from you. This is like giving a personal opinion to the student, which is actually very hurtful, or something which can actually hurt the sentiments of the student, right? So how many times it happens that there are a few students in the class who you know are more likely to engage in some sorts of unacceptable behaviors or deviating from the norms, and as teachers there is always an eye of suspicion on them. But that's again like very unfair to have that personal opinion on those students, and at times they actually are not responsible for certain things which happens in the classroom. Why I'm saying this is because a lot of students complain saying that, ma'am, whenever something bad happens, and the entire blame comes on to me, and at times like I'm actually not responsible for it. So we cannot personalize our opinions based on the past experiences. We have to refrain from that. Changing the subject. If the student is talking to you about something, we are not actually giving due attention to that and we are rapidly changing the subject to something else. Again, this is a bad strategy that we engage in. Automatic responses. The first thing that comes to our mind, which may be judgmental, we just pass on to that judgment, which actually hinders the process of a good rapport with our students. False reassurance. Now it is again very important. There is a difference between being rational and being, optimistic. Now here, too much optimism is also not required because our brain is, channelized in such a manner that it does not take false reassurances. It talks about logic, isn't it? So we cannot give false reassurances to the students that, you know, uh, you will do wonders in your career. I mean, it's good to say such things, but we have to provide a good rationale for that. See, it's always good to do hard work and smart work. Only if you do that, you will be able to achieve your goals. So you need to set your targets or goals in a very realistic manner. So you need to set smart goals. Again, this is a sort of a reassurance which is more, rational in nature. And also another thing is that sympathy is subjective. We have to differentiate empathy from sympathy. They are not same. Sympathy is, it works on emotions and empathy works on rational. So we have to be empathetic towards our students and not sympathetic towards them. Defensive responses. The student is trying to explain something and we are just like counter attacking it, can actually lead to poor rapport formation, with our students. Either we are passive or aggressive. Again, like those are some of the other obstacles in the rapport formation. Now, this is another important area that we need to focus upon: teacher-student relationship dynamics. When to refer the student to counselor or to any other mental health professional. Neediness and dependency. At times, it may happen that the student is constantly bothering you for each and everything, be it related to his or her personal life or professional life. It becomes a problem for us. We need to have a healthy boundary with our student in those manner that we are not making the student dependent on us. The beauty of counseling is not to introduce dependency on us. Rather, we are fostering autonomy in our students. Or when there are lack of boundaries. How many of you have experienced the students complimenting you? Ma'am, you are looking beautiful today. Or sir, you are looking very handsome. Now, these things may appear very positive or they may make you feel very happy about it. But at the same time, we have to make sure whether we should be reacting to such statements with intense emotions or shall we take a neutral stance in those scenarios is something that is very important. So healthy boundaries are important. When should your student text you, or shall you be sharing your contact details with your student, or the mode of communication should be through emails, and that too also have some time foundations, isn't it? So that is again very important. Excessive disclosure. You should not be disclosing too much about your personal experiences to your students, because that may again make it difficult for you. So that can actually lead to transference. They may transfer a lot of positive emotions onto you which are not unnecessary, and they are actually unnecessary noises in the process of classroom interactions. Unreasonable requests. For example, if they want to meet you again and again, ma'am, I have this problem, can you please listen to me? Or when you find it difficult to end conversations with them, then it is again a red flag sign wherein you need to stop it somewhere. Or they keep on showing themselves to you very often that today I am facing this problem, tomorrow again the student is standing right in front of you and talking about other issues related to his or her personal or professional life. So these are some of the red flags that we should be aware of. Now in our classrooms, these are some of the possible signs and symptoms which may go unattended or unnoticed, but require a lot of immediacy and attention in order to introduce a healthy, therapeutic relationship or a therapeutic judgment towards the student. So if a student has suicidal thoughts or hopelessness, any student with a suicidal intent should never be taken non-seriously. It requires immediacy. Or if there are any homicidal thoughts, we need to refer these students, and the authorities have to be intimated about it. Or if the student is showing extreme mood shifts, irrational behavior, or lack of judgment, there are self-harming tendencies, odd behavior and speech patterns, poor personal hygiene, extreme changes in sleeping, appetite, and weight, decreased concentration, motivation, and interest, excessive substance use, internet use, or gambling, family issues, social isolation, loss, relationship issues, or consistent poor academic functioning. These are some of the possible red flag signs that we should be aware of as teachers in order to guide our students better, because we cannot take them, very lightly. These issues require immediate attention. Now, coming on to setting the limits. Again, limit setting is very important. How should we build that boundary or healthy boundary with the students? We should be very much clear in our role. We are teachers or mentors. We cannot take responsibility for each and every domain of our student's life, right? We cannot take the personal social responsibility of the student to such an extent that we are too much into their life. So we have to clarify our role very discreetly, that we are the teachers or mentors and we have limited access and role in their life, right? We have to guide them definitely, but within our limits. Understanding the red flags that we have just now talked about, we should be aware of these red flag signs or symptoms that these students may present with. Responding appropriately to students' neediness and unreasonable requests. We have to make sure whether these demands are actually reasonable or they are too unreasonable for us to, pay attention to. And we have to be very much mindful of our personal reactions and feelings. At times, it happens that, we give too much into our, students' needs, that we forget that, we also have a personal life, and we need to create that dichotomy between our own personal experiences, feelings, that we should not be overburdened or overwhelmed by these issues. Again, we can experience a lot of fatigue as a result of it. So it's very important, especially when we are dealing with teenagers, to have very healthy boundaries, because if we do not have those set limits with them, then it can definitely backfire onto us and can have a lot of consequences as a result of it. Now, there is one statement that I would like to use, is that we can be friendly with them and not friends with them. So it's good that we are giving them that space and we are being friendly towards them, but we have to make sure that we are not their friends, we are their teachers, and that role has to be very much clarified. Otherwise, these boundaries will be diluted, and this is definitely going to hinder the classroom interaction with our students. So I would request Father to kindly just sum it up.
Okay, thank you, Tanuja. I
Thank you
think
so
we
much.
are overshot the time. We have overshot the time. So basically, as we have been discussing, well, we are not going to be, counselors as such, but then we are picking up some of the counseling skills into our teaching learning process. So there's a concept like, barefoot counselor or lay counselor. So we are all, called to be so. So in the beginning, I had said, it's not just about teaching maths or physics, chemistry, or commerce. We are all called to accompany our students, accompany their emotional, interpersonal, psychosocial, even familial journey, but obviously keeping boundaries, as Tanuja was saying. So to help the students first to be aware of themselves and of depending on on themselves. That's what we mean by self-direction. Every time they don't have to come to us. We need to develop them as independent human beings at the age of 15, 16, or 17, so that they are able to solve their own problems. They become, their own problem solvers, and to make them, best choosers for themselves. We don't choose for them. We don't tell. Obviously, there are certain situations where we direct them, but mostly, making them to, choose by themselves. We need to show them alternatives. That's what we need to do. Maybe 4 useful skills or qualities that we have been discussing. One is listening, active listening, empathy, genuineness or congruence, and then obviously acceptance and respect, towards them, accepting them as they are, still respecting them, even if there are, difficulties with them, or maybe part of their temperament is not acceptable to us, but still, receiving them, accepting them as our own students and trying to help them. So this is what we would like to, we would like to tell you. So thank you very much for patiently listening to us. Thanks a lot. Over to Sister Sannidhi or someone at Mango.
Yeah, Lavina ma'am can take up.
Okay. A very good evening to one and all. In ordinary life, we hardly realize that we receive a great deal more than we give, and that it is only with gratitude that life becomes rich. As we express our gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them. Despite the difficult times, we have been blessed to have got a myriad opportunities to better ourselves and in the process help and assist our students in being remarkable individuals. On behalf of St. Agnes PU College, I consider it my privilege to propose a vote of thanks as a fitting conclusion to this insightful webinar that we have had the opportunity to be a part of. It is really great that this webinar turned out to be so relevant to the times, and in being so could be marked as a success. We have been most fortunate to have 3 speakers to throw light on the topic of nurturing youth through counseling paradigms and skills. In the chaos of the present world, as adolescents are exposed to innumerable physical, emotional, and social issues, it is the need of the hour that influencers like teachers understand the nuances of their problems and learn to deal with them in an appropriate way. In this context, we are extremely grateful to Dr. Father Viju P. Devasi, Director and Dean, Christ, Dean to be University, Delhi NCR campus, for sparing his valuable time to address us on issues which affect the present-day youth and helping us to understand and learn ways to be contributors in the transformation of young minds to leaders of tomorrow. Thank you, Father, for reminding us about the important role that we play in the lives of many who we are fortunate to teach. Dr. Sureka Chukali, Head of the Department, School of Humanities and Social Science, Christ, has shed light on the concerns of present-day youth and has shown us how, as teachers, we could guide them in the right direction through the various counseling skills that we could develop. Thank you, ma'am, for highlighting things to us in such a unique manner. It made this session more interactive and interesting, in addition to underlining the role that we could play in the lives of troubled youngsters. Ms. Tanuja Bharadwaj, Research Scholar, Department of Psychology, Christ, has ably added to the subject matter and given us the insight into counseling skills of rapport building, reflections, and immediacy. We truly appreciate your effort in elucidating many aspects which we were probably aware of, but did not identify as a skill that we could employ to help our students. Thanks to Mr. Ashok for his assistance in helping conduct this webinar. An organization can grow multifold only under able leadership. I would like to extend my sincere thanks to our Principal, Sister Noreen, Vice Principal, Sister Janet, for recognizing the importance of this issue and organizing a webinar to that effect. Thank you, Sister Sanidhi, for taking the initiative to arrange this program. A big thank you to all our guest participants and my colleagues for your ever-present enthusiasm in making the effort to improve oneself to become better facilitators in the overall growth of our students. We can definitely attribute the success of this webinar to the joint efforts of the organizers, resource persons, and participants. We look forward to having many more such programs with the same team. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Father Viju, thank you so much, and
Thank
all
you, sir.
the speakers, Sureka and Tanuja. It was excellent, and I hope our teachers have taken in, and it was a unique experience to all of us. Thank you so much, Father.
Thank you, Sister Noreen. Thank you. Thank you, Sister Sannidhi. So let's wind up the session. Thank you. Have a great good evening.
Yeah, thank you, Father. Thank you for you and your team, and Ashok also, who helped us, and all the participants. It was really very, very informative. I could recall all my psychology classes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.